So, let's talk about the short story. We're going to define it a little bit, identify what a short story is. We'll describe it, which is sort of definition, but we'll describe some of the qualities of it. And then we'll talk about the dramatic structure of the short story. Okay, so let's start with our definition. Okay, we're going to start with the story part. Okay, short stories are stories, which are narratives that is an account of something that happened. Okay, and the narrative occurs within a setting, a time and place, and in that narrative, characters execute plots toward outcomes. Okay, people do things that result in certain changes to their world or result in different things happening in that world, in that setting. Okay? Now, this sounds like a novel. Well, yeah, a novel is a story. Movies are stories. Some songs tell stories. YouTube videos, many people will tell stories in video format. Okay? Something my brother told me is a short story. It's a narrative where people do things. Okay? Last weekend sounds like a short story. You know, it was only 3 days long or 2 days long. 3 days for us. It was a holiday, and things happened that weekend. So the idea of a story is sort of a natural, intuitive thing for us. Okay, and these are some of the terms that we use when we talk about stories. Well, so how about the short part? Okay. Well, short is typically identified as meaning not very long. I mean, that's what it is. It sounds like some like bogus idea that someone came up with just to say, well, I'm going to write a novel, but no, it's really short. Okay, so it's a short story. Well, that's kind of true. The difference is though that short stories are older than novels. Short stories came around first. We've had short stories a lot longer than we've had books or novels or movies or anything like that. Okay, because if you think about it, okay, a short story comes from what we call the oral tradition. Oral tradition is people who don't have to be able to write, but they can speak a language and they tell stories. Well, they tell short stories. Okay, think about the way you talk to your friends. You talk to your friends in short stories. My brother talks to me in terms of short stories, like I said just a slide or two ago. You live every day in the oral tradition where you talk to people and say what happened. And when you say what happened, you aren't giving them a novel, you're giving them an account of that thing that just happened. We don't talk in novels or movies, we talk in short stories. Really. You know, for example, if I were to tell you something that happened when I was riding the motorcycle in Canada, okay, I nearly went off the road and crashed. It was one time because there was a heavy crosswind, and I reached back to make sure the pack was on the back of the motorcycle. And when I turned around, I had been blown a little ways across the road, and I fell off the road into the gravel shoulder, onto the gravel shoulder. Now, you can drive on the shoulder and get back up onto the road, but this gravel was really, really deep. I mean, it was new gravel, so it was really fresh. It wasn't hard. So when I hit it, it was like suddenly driving in mud. And riding on a motorcycle, when that happens, it does strange things to the front wheel. It makes it wobble, and it nose dives, and it's really hard to control. But I was able to get it back up on the road, and I didn't crash. But it was the first time that I was very close to wiping out on a motorcycle at like full speed, 70 miles an hour going down the freeway. Okay? End of story. Now, it's not really a good story or anything, but I just told you about what happened that one time. I didn't tell you about the whole trip. That'd take you like hours. I mean, but I can tell you that one little thing that happened. And then someone else would say, oh yeah, man, something like that happened to me. And then they'd tell their short story. Or if I wanted to tell about the place I was at, this the way it looked or what I did when I was there, this one town that I passed through, I would tell you a short story. Okay? That is why short stories are intuitive the way we they are the way we think. Short stories are. Okay? The way short stories are created, and we're pretty natural at this. This is the way we speak. They're short, so they have to grab the listener. They have to get their attention and then hold on to them. Okay, when we tell a story, it has to be interesting, and it has to remain interesting. Okay, now the little motorcycle story I just told you, it wasn't really all that interesting. Nothing really happened. I didn't put any cool stuff into it. I just quickly gave you the 2 minute version, right? If I were to design it in such a way that it was really catchy, and then give you some punchline that slaps you in the face, then you'll remember that story. Okay, the way we speak, we try to affect our listener. That's why when here it says maybe plant a big sloppy kiss on if you want to be emotional, to surprise you or make you feel an emotion. Okay, that's where the phrase "good story" comes from. If a story isn't good, there's nothing that is catchy about it. And then we sarcastically say, best story ever, Dad, right? Because there's nothing to it. It doesn't catch your attention and hang on to it. So we know the way stories work intuitively. Okay? Some of the qualities of them. And this is like the description that I said we talk about. Short stories have a limited time. They're short by definition. So they have to work quickly. Okay, they have to focus attention. There's not a lot of time to give a lot of detail. Okay, so things have to be designed to fit inside of a short number of pages. Maybe you want to fit it into 5 pages. Maybe you want to put it on 2 pages so it'll go into a magazine. Maybe you don't mind if it's 20 pages long, but you don't have a long time to work. Okay, you have to invest the reader on a non-literal level. Okay, you have to you don't have time to create a big story that makes the reader interested. You have to somehow attract them without knowing a lot of story. One way that works is you focus on mood. For example, if I'm talking about that motorcycle crash story, I might ramp up the mood. I might tell you how gorgeous it is out, or I might tell you how early it was in the morning, how tired I was, or I might make the weather even more dramatic, and tell you about the huge wind, or I might get really excited about when I went off to the edge of the road and I hit this gravel and I started flying around. The mood is a way that I might attract your attention and hang on to it. Okay, because I don't have time to really get you interested in me to tell you that it was important that I stay alive. Okay, short stories are what we call fragmentary. Okay, there's again, like having to depend on mood. I don't have time to build up a lot of character. I don't have a lot of time for trivial information. Okay, you don't know what kind of motorcycle I was on. You don't know what time of year it was. You don't know what day it was. You don't know what road I was on. I did say Canada, I think. I only have enough time to give you what's important, so I got to know what's important. Okay? Now, one thing about stories is short stories, they don't always present a complete resolution. Okay? You don't know I'm not going to go into if that changed the way I ride. I'm not going to go into the way that affected my life or the way it affected somebody else's life when I told the story to them. I told the story to my wife and she said, oh, I want you to quit riding motorcycles and, whatever. It's not like I'm going to be able to come to the end of the story and make it really, really, really complete. I don't have that much time. Okay? So there are things that you're not going to know, and you have to sort of be ready for that. And the idea of having plot twists, it is often the case that just the interesting thing that happened is the whole point of the story. Okay? Now, in the final note, it says they're often experimental and unusual. A lot of times, short stories, since there's not a bunch of sort of standard storytelling like a novel that we're used to, or a movie that has a big long story arc, a lot of times when a story is very fragmentary, or when we don't get a lot of information, when there's some interesting, unusual plot twists, it sometimes seems, I don't know, for lack of a better word, weird. Okay? So that happens. The way I think of short stories is this: they're sort of like the sports cars of prose because they work so aggressively and fast and effectively. Okay? They're streamlined, if you will. Okay? Since they are since there's not a lot of time for them to get fat and lose the point, it's often easy to see their dramatic structure. Okay, dramatic structure. Well, every narrative has a dramatic structure. It's the shape of the story. Okay, in the simplest sense, a story has a beginning and a middle and an end. Okay, the world. I get you into the world of the story. I tell you what happened there in the plot, and in the end, this is how the world is different. Okay. Now, this sort of three-part pyramid, if you will, or triangle, it's a little bit more complicated than that. We've, in our study of literature over time, we've made it a little bit more complex because of the things that we see people use in stories all the time. Okay, for example, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 6 different items here. Okay, we'll talk about each one individually over the next few slides here and explain. The story starts over here and it goes this way and it ends here. Okay, so let's look at how this works. Okay, starting with exposition. Okay, and I won't. This won't be here for all the slides, so remember the order of this. Exposition, main conflict will go up. Remember the climax is at the top. I'll remind you when we get there. But when we look at this, okay, starting with exposition. The exposition establishes the situation. It tells you what the world is that you're in. It gives you whatever background information you need in order to get the story moving. And like I say, it's not going to be a lot because the story is short. In a novel, you might have pages and pages. In a short story, you might have 2 sentences. Okay? That's the exposition. It exposes the situation when the story begins. The second part is the main conflict. Okay? Now, conflict is not always a fight. It's the struggle. Okay? It's the tension. Something needs to be done. It needs to happen in order for the end of the story to make sense. Okay? Something has to be sort of worked out or figured out. Okay? This conflict can be internal or external. It can be I'm upset that my mom is angry at me because I sold my car, the car that she gave me when I was in college, something like that. Internal. It may be external. I may be trying to survive a blizzard, or I might be trying to stay on the road with my motorcycle. Okay, it might be typical or unusual. It might occur, last weekend while I was, driving, or it could be in the year 3540, and the spaceships that have landed on Earth from Venus or whatever. It can be a bizarre thing. It could be bees. It could be a short story about the books on a shelf. Okay, so the conflict can be a sort of a normal thing or something that's interesting, and you'll see that a lot. That's where the experimental idea comes in, because if you have an interesting or bizarre conflict, then what you're doing is you're being experimental. Okay, it can be simple or complex. Okay, so the conflict is what drives the story forward. It's what makes things happen. The rising action is, as we're looking at that slope, the rising action, literally, we say it's rising, and then when it hits the top, then it falls down. It's tension building. Okay, something is going wrong, then something goes wronger, and then it's like someone gets angry, or someone is like really happy, and it's like, what's wrong with that person? Why are they so happy that we're going bankrupt or whatever? So this is the tension, and the tension is getting higher and higher, and there could be a plot twist. You might, at some point, everyone seems happy, and then, Timmy comes home from France, and up he's getting married. Oh man, well, we thought that Janet was going to get married first, or whatever. There can be a plot twist in this rising action, but the rising action is the story taking place. Now, the climax is the top of the peak before it falls. This is where the tension is relieved. This is where everything is figured out. This is where you understand how it should be. Okay, it's resolved. The tension is resolved. It's fixed. Thing is that sometimes that happens at the very end of the story. So it like is its own falling action and resolution. Sometimes it happens, and then the people in the story realize what's going on. Oh, and then there's something that happens because of it. There's an effect of the climax. This would be the falling action. Sometimes it's very short. Sometimes it's longer. Okay, if there's a story where some problem is worked out, and the whole conflict was that these 5 people had a problem together, and the climax is where 2 of them work out the issue. Maybe the falling action is where they go bring it to the other 3 people. Okay, the story probably doesn't end right when the problem is solved. There has to be some falling action. Okay, and that falling action will often include, it will explain how everything is going to be from now on, or it will make you at the end understand what happened. Okay, sometimes that is like the last line of the story. Sometimes it's part of the falling action. Sometimes when we think of the resolution, we think of it as, in the end, we, the reader, we say, well, what was it about? What was the story about? Okay? And we understand that even if it's not in words, we can pinpoint a spot in the story where we understand what it was about at the end, and that's the final resolution. Okay? Okay, so now for a couple of examples. Table 7 is a short story, a short narrative that's actually a video. Okay? And then there's a short story I want you to read. But I'm going to stop here so we can, I can give you time to watch that video, and then I will talk about it, and then I'll have you read a short story, and you'll submit some homework for that. After you're done reading that, you'll show me some analysis of it. But first, go now and watch Table 7. The link is in Schoology. Watch it. I'd say watch it twice. It's not that long. So then you'll have a good feel for what happens in the story. And then come back and watch the second Explain Everything video.